Hello everyone! Welcome to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Doomsday. Vince. I am Vince.
Vince is having a bit of a multiple personality crisis.
Crisis on infinite Vinces.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, hopefully eventually we can get post-crisis.
Post-crisis.
So
we'll enter 52 eventually.
Then we'll go into all those other ones, and then we'll have a final crisis, and then what'll happen? Blackest Night will happen after that.
And then we'll have Captain Logan and Vince. It'll be like Batman and Robin, only cooler.
Right. And then I'll die, but it'll turn out I just got sent back to the dawn of time. Okay, so Vince, what are we talking about today?
Alrighty, I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget. Now I have a few questions.
We're so prepared all the time.
That's right. I have a few questions in here. Should people like something because it's classic? Should people, or does classic mean that something is good? And does something have to be good to be part of film canon, or canon in general?
Is this going to become a trend where you just start writing random questions down and then that becomes the podcast? You're like, do I feel like pizza today? If I were a tree, what kind of a tree would I be? You know, the sun is farther away than I might have thought at first glance.
I don't know. It kind of seemed a lot like one of those questions that you find for a college essay. Here's 5 different questions.
Right.
Answer them all.
And pretend like they're the same thing, and come up with a cohesive thesis statement that encompasses all of it.
My thesis statement is, could you repeat the question, please?
So what are we talking about?
It's just essentially we'll start with is something good just because it's classic?
Well, obviously my answer to that is no, because that's too simplified.
Is something classic because it's good?
That's harder, because I've always resisted the idea of an instant classic. How can something instantly be classic?
I don't get it. And it's funny to me.
It just seems to me like classic should mean it's older than right now and is important. Okay, here's the deal. Usually classics seem to be important because they influence what came after it. So how could something be an instant classic? How can you influence something if you just happened? You were the thing that got influenced.
You know, I would completely argue against the point I'm about to make, but here it is. I would almost say Sin City became an instant classic because it created an incredible trend in movies. Even Max Payne is a Sin City knockoff. Okay,
but it wasn't a classic the night it came out. I mean, the day the comic was made. So it's not an instant classic.
But
people say this. Look, I've seen. This is what I mean. I have seen people like who will write a movie review of a movie they just saw that just came out this weekend, and they'll say instant classic. Now, I'm assuming what they mean is they can be sure. What we're basically arguing about is semantics, right?
Yeah.
They can be sure that it was so good and so revolutionary that it's going to influence everything that comes after it.
Yeah.
But you can't know that. Nothing is an instant classic.
Not for sure. No, it's true.
I'm just saying, you're like. In fact, couldn't you be setting trends just by saying that? Couldn't it be that it's an instant classic, but only because all the critics said it would be?
Could be.
So all the critics are like, you know what? This film is really important. And then a bunch of filmmakers go, oh my god, that film is important. And then they make a bunch of films just like it. And that's why it's a classic.
If Ebert jumped off a cliff, would all the other ones do the same? You know, all the other Eberts. But I'm Ching. My bad.
Boy, you sure...
Way to kill a podcast conversation immediately.
You sure know how to kill a podcast conversation. That was an instant classic, Vince.
It might not be an instant classic, but it was an instant killer, and this is true.
I don't think something is good just because it's old.
Yeah. And you know, that's something that I've had arguments with people about. In fact, I had a friend the other day that said, you know, Vince and I prefer things that are older. It's got to be older to be good. And I'm like,
and you just looked at him. Yeah.
And he says, isn't that true? I said, no. I said, I'm trying to be a film critic here, pal. Mm-hmm. I'm like, how can I be a film critic if I just watch old movies? I got to take in new things, and I'm inevitably going to find things that are good. I mean, if you read my reviews, you know that I found things that are good, and same with you.
Sure, right.
So, it's, yeah.
The last year or two, you know, more bad than good if you're me, but yeah, but yes, but yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. I think that people very often will have this mentality and not realize it. Where they'll be like they'll love things that are older, and then they think that makes them smarter somehow because they're well cultured, and so even if they're not sure why something older, and I'm not sure how far back I mean when I say older, but let's say before their time.
Yeah.
You know, let's say I was really talking up 2001: A Space Odyssey just because it was made 5 years before I was born. Okay. Now, 2001: A Space Odyssey is considered a classic. It was revolutionary in that it changed the way science fiction films were made, and people think that it's a good example of a really great story. Having said that, I've never seen it, so I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, I've actually never sat down and watched it. I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I've never sat down and watched it straight the way through. So, I can't say it's good. Now, naturally, I can't say it's good just because I haven't seen it, but knowing some things about it, it would be really easy for me to go out and be like, 2001: A Space Odyssey was one of the greatest science fiction films ever made. I wouldn't say that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But some people who have seen it would say that, even if they don't like some other things that are kind of like it, because well, it's long. Some people find it kind of boring. It's not it's not a real quick paced kind of thing.
You know, that's interesting. That's a Kubrick film, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
And Kubrick, almost everything that guy does, people regard so highly. And now I say almost everything because he did have one incredible miss.
What was that?
With Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh, yeah. I missed that.
And when I saw Eyes Wide Shut, and then somebody told me it was a Kubrick film, I said, really? That was Kubrick?
Now, Kubrick did Dr.
Strangelove?
Now, there's a really interesting example of this.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Because Dr. Strangelove is considered a classic. And usually when you get something that people talk about that highly, people find that it's difficult to find anything wrong with it. I saw it and liked it, but I had problems with it. I was bugged by the soundtrack. That entire film is nothing but war drums all the way through, and it gave me a headache. When I finished watching it, I had that stuck in my head all day long, and it drove me crazy. I thought it messed with the pacing of the film. Now, again, you have to kind of, and this is another thing about classic films is that, of course, our idea of what good pacing is different now than maybe it was at the time, and that sort of thing. And so, we're used to quicker paced movies and stuff, and we're used to 3 acts and all that kind of thing. And granted, movies back then had 3 acts also. It's just they were more spread out. And so, obviously, you have to put yourself in the mindset of the time frame to really appreciate some classic films. But I still felt like it had pacing issues. I thought that even for the pacing ideals of the time, I thought it had pacing issues.
I wasn't bothered by the pacing.
Huh.
I don't recall.
There were places
really
where I was bored because it was a comedy. It was supposed to be funny. And there were places I thought it just sat there. It was just flat.
Now the war drums thing, I'll address. I think part of the issue with that is that they were trying to get away from your traditional crazy comedy, and I'm going to use it's a mad bad world as the trendsetter, not the trendsetter. I use that word wrong, or term rather, but as a good example of things that just devolve into insanity and this Benny Hill type of music that's going on over the entire type of those things.
Right.
And I'm not expressing myself particularly well here, but it's one of those type of things. They want that crazy soundtrack, and then when you go with Dr. Strangelove, they break the trend and they do something completely different. Now what they did may have been extremely obnoxious, but it was different, therefore people consider it classic. Now, is that a good reason to call something classic?
I don't know. Just because it's different.
Yeah.
You know what? You know what springs to mind? Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction springs to mind because that is a film that I finally saw just a few months ago. Had never seen it, and I think I borrowed it from you, in fact. And yeah, Vince gets me to watch all these instant classics, and Pulp Fiction is an interesting movie because I surprisingly enjoyed it, and so I can appreciate it as being a quote unquote classic at this point, in that it was a major trendsetter. And yet I do sometimes feel like people with that movie held it in such high regard because it was so different.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things.
And it's hard for me to put my finger on why I liked it too. I have a tough time with that.